Okay, get in the zone. Get in the zone. It's a Monday. Mondays are rough.
Yeah, Mondays was definitely... Oh, should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah, let's say that. Okay, we're starting here.
Okay. Hi, I'm introducing myself first this time.
Right.
I am Punct, aka Punct, and
AKA
we are
Dr.
watching
Punct.
MI1. Dr. Punct, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. So your doctorate is in Tom Cruise studies, right?
No, thank God. I only have like a month worth of Tom Cruise studies compared to 6 years of studies in my doctorate degree. You guys don't even want to know what 6 years of Tom Cruise studies would look like.
You didn't do your dissertation over Edge of Tomorrow or something?
No.
Comparative analysis of the first Top Gun and Maverick.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
Yeah, we'll get there at some point. Oh, and my name is Arcturus. People can call me Arc or Archie. So, the tone of this one's going to be odd because we actually did a full recording of our commentary of MI1, and then I had an audio blip and lost over 50 minutes of it. So, we're doing it again.
Yeah.
These things happen. This one, I think, should be the last one people listen to. No, I think they should listen to this before they go to Rogue Nation. Rogue Nation is a nice little victory lap. This is where we're going to get fairly dissertational about our thoughts on Ethan Hunt and the De Palma movie and like how this all lines up to everything else that we've talked about.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, so it's going to be less jokey and less reactive to what's on screen and more talking about our various TED Talks that will overlap and bleed into each other.
Yeah,
So.
we are giving basically our definitive explanation of the queer reading of MI1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which, again, such a fucking good movie with a queer reading. It's really good.
It's so good. Yeah, the thing is, I like Rogue Nation is my favorite in terms of like it's the most enjoyable to watch, but MI1 is the one that makes me go most insane because there are so many layers and it's so spicy and it's so crunchy and I just like I love it so much.
Yeah, and the thing I realized like last time we were doing this is like I don't think I really loved Ethan Hunt as a character until I watched MI1. Like this is the thing that unlocked the crazy. This is why I am as unhinged as I am right now. There are no hinges left.
Yeah, because it's like just Oldathan is incredible, but until you see how he became that person, it's like, holy shit, this is a whole ass person going through like boatloads of trauma and then like not entirely, but partially coming out the other side.
Yes, yeah, and the lobbed arc of his character from start to finish is truly a sight to behold.
Yes.
So, I think that's enough with the preamble. I'm now warmed up. Let's do this. My copy of this movie is 1 hour...
Oh, you should turn on subtitles.
Thank you. For some reason, they don't auto-turn on. Yeah. So, my version of this movie is 1 hour, 50 minutes, and 26 seconds. And I am going to be hitting play right now.
And it is interesting that this movie is technically shorter than MI2, but also it feels so much shorter because it's not a slog. It feels just like so tightly paced.
Yeah. I could say like that out of every movie, this one does have the tightest pacing. And like we know from many, many stories why the MI movies are paced the way they are because of the way that they are strung together by a bunch of lunatics who we respect a lot but also fear very much. But this one like was very rigorously pre-planned even though the script went through a final 3-day rewrite at the last moment. You know, because
to save it from the clutches of Robert Towne.
We don't know that for sure. We can assume that because we've now watched MI2, but we don't know that for certain that it was Robert Towne's fault.
Okay. So this is interesting. The very first character we actually see on screen is another sort of like star of this era who you might know, and actually goes uncredited, if I believe, in this movie, Emilio Estevez, who you might know from The Breakfast Club, things like that. And he plays Jack, who we know a little bit about from the bonus materials of MI1. Basically, they have dossiers on all of the characters, which were included with the bonus DVD materials. And we know from that Jack actually has a history with Ethan. They were roommates in the CIA Academy. And then
Spook School. Mm-hmm.
Spook School, yeah. And and Jack thought that Ethan would make a good IMF agent, and sort of like recommended he look into it.
Mm-hmm. So he is the one to blame for looping Ethan into this life. Mm-hmm. Though I think it seems kind of inevitable. One of our favorite things about, so there's basically two like backstories provided for Ethan depending on where you're pulling it from. The first is provided.
Just 1 second. Look at that reveal. That's our little boy.
It's needle. Nope.
Warning for the needle right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ugh. Fuck, what was I even saying? So, you get
backstories.
Yeah, you get two different backstories for Ethan. The one that we like is the one that you get in MI1 rather than the dossiers that came with Fallout. It's Fallout or Rogue Nation. In which, like, Ethan was, a farm boy who discovered that he's really good at theater and then somehow catapulted that into getting involved with the CIA Academy and then wound up in the IMF. Which I've said this multiple times, I think it's way easier to take somebody who has charisma and the ability to perform like Ethan does, and then teach that guy to shoot a gun. And that's way easier than the alternative, where you take, like, an army ranger or whatever the fuck, and then teach them the kind of swag that Ethan has to dumb down everything about him into a single word.
No, that's great. And I think that I love a lot of the details that we get from this backstory in the dossier, because we get things like Ethan also recruited one of the other members of his team that we see at the beginning of this movie. Sarah was with Ethan in his undergrad institution where he was studying, I believe, linguistics and theater and drama, something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And
humanities boy, yeah,
humanities boy, and he actually thought that she would make a good researcher for IMF.
There we go.
And and so she is partially sort of like Jack is the reason that Ethan is here. Ethan is the reason that Sarah is here.
Yeah. One of the things that, like, feels very obvious, like, as you watch the opening before, like, the big turn, is that all these characters do have a lot of history. So even if you don't explicitly know, these people went to school together, they still have so much familiarity that it's obviously trying to convey that to you and trying to hammer it home so that when the turn happens, it is much more painful. And hello, John Voight.
John Voight, who you immediately think, oh my god, he has to be the bad guy.
See, did you have that feeling before, or have I infected you with my John Voight is always the bad guy thing?
I mean, literally, when I was telling my mom that John Voight was in this movie, she's like, has John Voight ever played a nice guy in his life? And I'm like, I don't think so. I think John Voight's just an asshole.
Yeah, so, like, the story from, like, the first time we watched this together, and we had no idea what the fucking story was. We knew some broad strokes, but that was it. I was like, oh, hey, it's John Voight, so he's gonna be the bad guy. And then he died, quote-unquote died. And I was like, oh shit, I'm so sorry, John Voight. I forgot that you were either the bad guy or you die in everything. And then he came back and he was the bad guy, and I was like, I'm vindicated! He was the bad guy the whole time.
I also want to point out the absolute weirdness of this set. This, like, very
this
90s,
set bothers
but
you
also,
so much.
It's so weird. It's like, what is this technology that's, like, built into the seat? You put in a cassette. It's not even like I'm so confused by what this is. And these are the actual, or the beginnings of the dossiers that are included in the DVD extras. Mm-hmm. There's just more included there. Included in there also is the information that Ethan is basically being groomed by Phelps to take over Phelps's team, which is, I think, also pertinent information considering what we're going to call the nice psychosexual knot between Claire, the character we saw in the first scene, being beautifully covered in blood, and then Jim, and then Ethan.
Yeah. Ever since you said the phrase psychosexual knot, it's been like literally the only thing I can think of about this movie. So I don't think we should get into it just yet because we still gotta set up characters, and like it feels very much like we keep referring, or at least I do. I keep referring to Leverage whenever I think about these movies because they usually are revolving around the big heist, and then there's like hiccups along the way. It follows the same kind of structure. And this is like where everyone is sitting around and like being friends with each other and is all starry-eyed and stuff. Because you have to establish how they were before so that, you know, when they're horribly traumatized, you can tell the difference.
Yeah, it's incredible to see this version of Ethan, which is so completely different than the rest of the movie, than MI2, MI3, all of those things, because this is really, he's in his element, he's part of a team, he feels safe, all of these things, and it just makes it even more stark when everything starts to go wrong. I love his face here. He makes such an awful face at the coffee, which is about the next line. So I love that awful face he makes.
I can tell exactly like the kind of bitterness that it is from the face that he made. It's good. So yeah, so most of these people are going to, well, half of these people are going to die, but there's John Voight, who's Phelps, and there's Ethan, who is in the leather jacket, and then there's Claire, who I'm pointing at.
Yeah, Claire is an interesting character because there's obviously, so well established at this early juncture, Claire and Jim are married. Even though that is a very weird age dynamic because Claire, if anything, is far more close in age to Ethan. And it's one of those things, the first time you watch it, we're like, oh, this is just a weird 90s thing where they were like not thinking about this. But
no, it's intentional.
It's definitely intentional. It's like there's definitely something weird about this dynamic.
Yeah, and like caveat obviously is like we're not weirdos who think like nobody can have like a relationship with like an age gap, but in this it is explicitly like there's a power dynamic going on. Phelps is the leader of the team and she is working under him, and it's made clear over and over that there's some weird shit going on here.
Yeah,
there should probably be an HR department involved.
There's a particular line at the very end of the movie that we're going to point out that always makes my skin literally crawl.
Yep.
Because it suddenly makes clear, oh, this is a really fucked up relationship.
This movie is fantastic on subsequent watches because once you know all of the like the actual way that this shakes out, it's like there's a lot of little things going through here. Yes.
Speaking of which, we probably should have said it earlier. If you are listening to this commentary without having watched the movie fully beforehand, stop right now, erase the last 15 minutes of your memory, go back, watch the movie completely by yourself. It's an incredible experience watching it for the first time, knowing as little as possible. So do that and then come back here and hear us go insane about it.
Yes, and tell you the queer theory of this movie. Which, like, this moment here of, like, there's so many moments of closeness between these characters, and so many times it's remarked on that, like, it builds up and up over time. Before we get to, everybody, like, dying and stuff, can I please tell you, like, my realization about perspective in this movie?
Please do.
Okay, so, I am a writer of fictions. When I'm choosing how to write stories, I tend to default to a specific type of perspective trick, which I always call third-person close perspective. And the idea is that, like, it is as close to a first-person...
I'm sorry, I have to just put my theory about this. Asta lasagna, don't get any anya, is such a bizarre and awful line.
Terrible!
My theory on a meta level is that they insisted on having an awful line there so that you will remember the specific technical thing that is this gum that ends up coming up several times. And my theory is they actually made that line awful on purpose. That is the only explanation I will accept.
Yeah. Yeah, so they don't make this character, like, completely fucking unlikable, because that was such a stupid line. Okay, perspective.
Okay, yeah, sorry, continue.
Okay, when I'm writing a story, I tend to default to a close third person's perspective, which is very, very close inside the brain of, like, the main point of view character. Like, you can do things like omniscient, where like you can see everything about every character. You could do like a further away third person perspective where you get glimpses of every character. But I like close third person because you get to like see everything through their eyes. And I've come to the realization that this movie is a close third person perspective from Ethan's point of view. And one of the things that tipped me off is like there are 2 or 3 different shots where we do that thing that De Palma just did, where the camera is literally Ethan's point of view. It's literally him walking around. And there's very few moments, like sometimes it cuts away to other characters, but for the majority of the movie we stay to specifically what Ethan is observing and what Ethan knows. There's like in Rogue Nation, which we watched last night, there's a lot of cuts away to like what's Solomon Lane doing and stuff like that. And that would be like a wider perspective. But I think when we take the fact that this is a very close third-person perspective, or first-person since it's a camera, and then we add in, like, the weird hallucinations that Ethan goes through as his trauma starts to set in, it's like it is trying to root the audience as deeply as possible into what is going on with Ethan. And I find that, like, on a structural level, very interesting.
I think it's also interesting because I think that, like, having the camera be Ethan's eyes is also on a meta level. I don't even know if this is a meta level or an in-text level, but like the fact that the fact that Ethan is wearing camera on his glasses in key pivotal moments of this movie is so important that it's sort of like setting that up as like, oh, Ethan is our camera. We are seeing what he's seeing, and like that is vitally important to how you understand what's happening. I just think that's cool.
And since like his entire journey in this is a journey for, you know, both finding the truth and then finding a way to prove it, it just, yeah. But also, we also see, because we're so close to his perspective and we're locked into it, we're stuck with him, basically, we also see how fucked up his perspective is. And it's great. And it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
I love the banter that's going to come up in just a second between Sarah, the one that I mentioned before, who's the one sort of in the middle of this mission with Ethan, and Ethan talking about Jack. It's very funny. It's very silly. And I love it because I have this theory that Ethan's type is tech boys because...
I can't believe when you pointed this out to me. I'm like, oh shit, yeah.
It's so true. He clearly has a thing for Jack, as this iconic line that you cannot let go of indicates.
Yeah.
He has a thing for Jack. He obviously has a thing for Benji. And then, like, Luther's the love of his life. And it's just like... It's so great that Ethan has a type, and it's tech boys.
It's very amusing, and I can't unsee it. Yeah. So he was never going to get it on with Walker, is what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sorry, it's just not. He's
not techie enough.
Not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine Walker doing anything with a computer. Really,
they have to be tech, and they have to be just a little bit mean to him. I think that's the root of it.
Oh, here's your vitally important line. That date with Sarah is definitely off. It's so good.
I can't fathom a way to read that is not the 3 of them going on a date. It doesn't make sense any other way. It's not like he's like her chauffeur. I don't get how it's not like, yeah, he's deciding that the date is off because he's part of the date.
Yep. It's like, if the only reason he would say that rather than Sarah, who's literally in the elevator also would say that, is if he is a participant in the date, and it is a date between him and Sarah and Jack is now no longer invited.
Yeah. And also, like, it folds into, you know, early Ethan as, well, even after the horrible tragedy that's going to happen, a core part of his characterization in this, I think, is that he's an ethical slut. He's he's extremely flirtatious. He's extremely like physically close to the people he's working with. There's obviously like tension going on between all of them, and yeah, and it leads. It's a very like ethical foot forward for this character, which is fascinating when we compare to old Ethan. Honestly.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating. That's probably something we should have mentioned earlier in the sort of like setup of the team is there's this feeling that just like Ethan is probably just like having sex with all of these people. They're just like, they're cool with it. It's just like it's routine for them. Like there's just like this feeling that like all of this is very, very much just like flirty, but not at all like jealousy or anything like that. It's very nice.
Yeah, because throughout this movie, like Ethan's like first salvo whenever he's in a situation is a very sharp-edged flirtation, and it often works pretty well for him.
Yeah, and that's something that we're probably going to talk about a little bit more throughout, but there's something really interesting about Ethan's gender dynamic in this movie, because he uses his wiles and his sort of like his feminine charm sort of thing a lot to get what he wants in this movie, basically. We'll talk about it with Max. But
yeah, but we were paying attention last time. Did you notice him ever shoot a gun in this movie? Because I don't think I did.
I think he holds a gun maybe once, but I don't think he ever shoots one.
Yeah.
Which I think is fascinating. Because it's like, this is in some ways the complete opposite of MI3 and MI2. This is like a psychological thriller way more than it's an action movie in some ways.
Yes. Yeah. Very much so. Like, Ethan's role in this is not somebody who is going to be carrying a gun. He's somebody who's going to figure out a way to infiltrate a space. And if he can do it without a shot fired, he's going to do it without a shot fired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's... It sets up some of the core dynamics that then Macquarie picks up in the later trilogy, where, like, Ethan is not the person who's immediately going to, like, shoot first, ask questions later. He's very much, like, trying to talk everything out beforehand.
He's very merciful in ways that I think we've already discussed, but is fascinating. Oh, yeah, cool.
Almost
Everything's gonna go to shit now.
Merciful. Oh, yeah. There's going to be a very gruesome scene here in a minute, where Jack gets
impaled.
Sort of impaled on, like, unnecessary, like,
video game spikes is what I called it. This elevator has a video game spike trap at the top.
Yeah, and it's also it's unpleasant, and it's also just like I love this moment, though, right after, where you see Ethan's entire body tense up and Sarah tense up, and they sort of, like, they're still close together, but they almost seem like they're suddenly not in the same realm with each other. It feels like there's almost a fracture between them in that moment where that first hit of trauma occurs.
Yeah, because they were being flirty and having fun. They were obviously, like, physically comfortable with each other to, like, play into the bit even more than they needed to. And that's just gone now. Now things are serious. Now something has gone really fucking wrong.
And it's also interesting because this is yet another movie, like basically all of the movies where IMF is sort of pretty much the bad guy. Like, they set up this entire team to basically get killed, or at least don't seem to care when they get killed, because they care way more about finding the mole than they care about literally anything else. And that's it. It's really interesting how you can see it being laid out even here that, like, no, the IMF is really not trustworthy, from the, like, individuals who, like, the individual managers who Ethan talks with, like Kittredge, who's awful and we love, to, like, the whole management behind it, the way it's set up.
And there's enough people inside of it that you have to be careful.
Yeah.
So let's talk for a moment about Ethan and leadership, because we've discovered through watching these movies that it takes a long time for Ethan to actually become a leader. I would argue it doesn't actually happen until Ghost Protocol.
Yep.
Yeah. So in this moment do you have a thing first?
No, go for it.
So, like, in this moment when, like, shit is going wrong and Ethan automatically has instincts about what should be done right now, and he starts to follow them. He's like, look at him. He's like, he's struggling to keep himself under control because he knows what he wants to do. He knows what he thinks, like, is the way to get everybody out of this, and he's shut down by his mentor, who is his boss. And,
yeah,
like, it's easy to see that, like, this is going to follow him for quite a while because he had the instinct, he had the urge to do it, and maybe if he'd actually followed that instinct before Phelps had screwed everything up, fewer people would have died. Because a lot of people are going to die.
You can literally just imagine how much it weighs on Ethan's conscience, how all of this goes down, and how he can sort of in some ways see it as all his responsibility. We passed the scene now, but that scene where Ethan is sort of leaning against the wall with Sarah, next time you watch this movie, please appreciate the shadows of his eyelashes. They are literally the longest, most luxurious, beautiful things ever. Sorry, I just have to point that out.
Yeah. This is where you started to be like, hey, TC, pretty cute, huh?
Yes. I mean, obviously, I love Oldathan, but I do have a certain special fondness for Twinkathan. I find him very cute. And I think this movie is probably my favorite hair of his, but I'm not sure if that's because of the hair or just because I really like this movie and I really like Twinkathan.
No, I would, as somebody who always has to make a remark about the hair, this is really good hair. Yeah. I really like it.
The Fuse guys said that this is basically a buzz cut. No, it's not. This is not a buzz cut.
Everything I hear about these guys makes me think like they don't know what they're talking about.
I just remember all the stuff that annoys me about it. I don't remember all of the good stuff. I'm not trying to diss the Fuse guys. I am.
Meet me in the pit. And now everything goes to hell. I love the following the idea of like this all being shared in his perspective. The lack of information that we get when we come away from Ethan, I think brings that home. We only get bits and pieces until it's through Ethan's eyes, and I like that. I like playing with perspective. Oh, all these people are going to explode, and it's going to be sad.
Yep, there goes another one.
Another one bites the dust.
So terrible.
Sorry. It's a bit grim, isn't it?
It is a little bit. I appreciate it, though. Yeah. So there goes Hannah, who I actually have an interesting theory about, but I don't know that we'll have time to get into it. I just think that it's interesting that Hannah's basically entire characterization is like the frowny one. I have a little bit of a headcanon about that, but maybe we'll have time for that.
Oh, no, but it's time for another person to die. Though, man, when she came up to this the first time, I was like, what's going on here? And there goes Ethan running. I like that he's going from person to person, trying to stop any piece of this from happening. And he's always, 5 seconds too late. Yeah.
And remember, from the DVD extras, we know Ethan is literally the reason she is in the IMF. So this is, again, something you can just imagine how much it weighs on Ethan's conscience. This very important knife, which I think this is done really well because you have the police coming. So the first time I was watching this, I was just thinking, Ethan, you're getting your prints all over that fucking knife. And I was so distracted by that I did not even think about the fact that, what does the knife look like? Which ends up being a pivotal plot point.
But don't worry, it will be directly laid out for you in a pretty stunning sequence, which I really love.
Yes, it is very good.
Nice little flip. 10 out of 10. Yeah. Great form.
Yeah, and that looked like a very rickety
I do like that the last shot of those people is them, touching an earpiece.
This is very cool, the, low-tech thing of him actually, inserting something into the payphone. I love that. I don't know exactly how it works, but I think that's very cool.
It feels to me like it's some kind of encryption. His end has an encryptor and the other end has a decryptor is the only way it makes sense. We have a nice little Dutch angle here because everything's going to hell.
Yep. And it's also interesting, this scene is so cool because obviously we have just seen the incredible trauma that Ethan just went through. But you can also, once you know the next couple of scenes, you can see how this behavior on Ethan's behalf can be read completely differently by Kittredge as not the absolute traumatic breakdown of someone who, like, has just lost his whole team, but as basically, like, someone dodging all of your questions and refusing to give you straight answers and getting angry when you question him and all of these things. So it's really fascinating how well this is done in terms of you can see both perspectives on there.
Mm-hmm. Though we still think Kittredge is a piece of shit. But he's great.
Oh yeah, Kittredge is a fucking asshole, and I love him so much. I cannot wait to see him. I really hope he's just as much of an asshole in Dead Reckoning. I really do.
Yeah.
I hope that he hasn't learned anything over the past, 30 years.
I already love the body language of Ethan and how it's changed. Like, he's on the other side of having gotten out of what the fuck happened, and the exhaustion is already setting in. It is like after you've
eye
had
bags.
Yeah. It's like after you have like a panic attack or an adrenaline rush, and then you have to deal with the backwash of it, which sucks afterward.
You can literally see how fucking exhausted he is just by the way he moves. Like, he feels so tired in a different way than the sort of like Oldathan, just like he's been going for so long. This feels like a very sharp-edged, like, I'm running on empty sort of tired.
Because this is before he knows how to be exhausted. You could argue very easily that, like, Oldathan knows how to be tired. And this guy, this is bright as a fresh daisy, doesn't know that yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how very sort of distraught and almost, like, painful it is to look at Ethan in this scene. We're going to talk about some of the really good Dutch angles that come up. I love that this scene in some ways is, we talk about Fallout obviously as being, like, Word of God. It is supposed to be about going deeper and deeper into Ethan's nightmare. This scene particularly, and to me, reads as being shot almost like a horror movie, because it is sort of this horrific moment for Ethan of not just realizing that he's being blamed for killing his entire team, but also that the institution that he is associated with could let this happen.
Yeah, because he's come here, and this is supposed to be his extraction. And then you could just see it in his eyes that something is about to go very, very wrong as soon as he asks this question.
Yeah.
And
it's so good. This is the Dutch angle. Yeah, it's so good.
Yes. It's the most earned Dutch angle I've ever seen.
Yeah, explain a Dutch angle for people who aren't familiar with it.
So I'm very critical of Dutch angles and when they're used. A Dutch angle is this moment you could see, like, the camera is literally tilted to the side, and it creates this unstableness to the entire world. And it's meant to be, like, a very blunt force signifier that, like, something about the narrative has just gone very wrong. The world is literally off of its axis. And sometimes directors do this and they haven't earned it, and it looks stupid. But in this one moment, like, we are literally hearing Ethan figure out how his life has gone wrong.
Yeah, and De Palma seems to be very fond of the Dutch angle in general, which I guess if we're thinking about it as this whole movie is about basically Ethan's perspective on this really traumatic event, maybe it's justified generally. I think it's most justified in this scene because it feels like it drives how impactful this scene is. Because
we've at this point seen Ethan calm and happy and like he was settled in his job, and now everything that he knows is being flipped by the very people who gave him that stability. So
there's also, I don't know if we already missed it, I was not paying close attention, but there's also a fantastic line that's coming up about Kittredge basically saying, like, basically accusing Ethan of doing this, and he says, well, your father was very sick, and as we know, it's very expensive to die slowly in America these days. Yeah. And that line every single time makes me go crazy because it's only become more true in the 30 years since then. And
I think he's about to do it, yeah.
Yeah, there's sort of this reoccurring theme that, like, it's interesting, it literally gets stated later, the IMF does not pay well, which is really interesting from the perspective of, like, what this movie is saying about what we're calling the passion tax. Ark, do you want to describe that?
Yeah. It'd be a very expensive proposition. Wait, I want to hear Ethan's amazing fucking line.
Okay.
Look at his eyes. Look at his...
Yes.
He's so sharp. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so it's mentioned here that that the motivation for Ethan, that what they think is his motivation, is that, like, somebody dropped his family like $120,000 to help, like, with the fact that his father was dying slowly in America, which is very expensive. And we'll hear the same thing from Phelps later, that, like, this shit don't pay well. And it's basically like the IMF is shown over and over to not really care about their agents very much. Like, Ethan will eventually build a team where he is the person who takes care of his people, and it's often despite everything that the IMF is doing to get in his way of protecting them. And one of the recurring things about analyzing Mission Impossible is a lot of people say that Mission Impossible is a movie about making movies. And I don't think that's quite right for the entire franchise. I think there's, like, a lot more going on. We've talked extensively about a lot more going on. But one of the things I do think is very strong is the idea of the IMF and, like, Ethan as a parable for being an actor and being a filmmaker, and how you are expected... So let's just actually define the passion tax. The passion tax is this concept of, like, for people who want to work in creative fields, but who don't get paid very well, and that's just kind of expected because they're passionate about their work, so they'll take it. It happens a lot with people who work in video games, people who are screenwriters and writers, like the starving artist idea, that, like, because you want to be a creative person, you kind of accept for yourself that you're not going to have a comfortable life. And in the same way, IMF agents are being subject to this passion tax. They are obviously very skilled at what they do in a way that only comes from passion. And we've seen over and over throughout this entire franchise how fucking good Ethan is at what he does. And that doesn't just happen accidentally. So in this idea of a metaphor for the film industry, I do like the idea of, like, yeah, sometimes you're paying the passion tax to do all this shit, and it sucks.
And it's really fascinating, again, if we think about Rogue Nation, which we had our commentary for last night. In Rogue Nation, it's very blatant that Ethan Hunt is in some ways standing in for Tom Cruise as, like, the central figure of the IMF. Like, the IMF would be nothing without Ethan at that point in the story. But this is still very young. This is still very young Ethan. This is very early in his story. And he's still basically that starving artist. He is not known by everybody at the IMF. He doesn't have his own team. He doesn't have any of that. This is still Ethan when, like, he's basically being jerked around by all of the people who are higher up and who can just take advantage of the fact that he's doing something because he cares about people and because he cares about his job, rather than because he has any power in this situation.
Because now that we've seen MI2...
I fucking love that. I'm sorry. I love that he types into max.com.
Yeah, no wonder he's attracted to the smart boys, because he needs a little bit of help. But it's interesting how now we've actually sat down and we made it through MI2, and, like, the IMF is always the bad guy, kind of, at least in some way, even if it's just, like, a tertiary bad guy. And the way that, so sorry to bring up Rogue Nation again, but, like, the offer that Ilsa specifically makes to Ethan is that we could run away, we can go anywhere and become anyone. We just have to go. Is very much of, like, yeah, you guys have this ability, and you're stuck in this with this shithole organization that is going to kill you someday. And it's funny how, like, this small idea from MI1 just continues to grow and grow and grow until I hope Macquarie is going to kill the IMF in the end.
I really hope so. It would be so justified. It'd be so justified. It'd be such a good payoff for basically, at this point, the entire series for IMF to be the big bad.
Yeah. The way Ethan gets screwed in this movie and then goes on to, like, basically take care of his team in the way that the IMF specifically doesn't take care of them feels like a direct reaction that is building from this moment. He can't trust the IMF, but he can build something within it and protect the people he cares about. I like Ethan Hunt. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I fucking love Ethan. I also love, again, thinking about this very 90s interaction, I love that Ethan sends literally like 126 emails in a night in all different languages to probably a lot of non-existent emails. He's literally just sending them to a possible email if there's somebody named Max at this listing. I think that's very fucking funny.
Yep. Just wearing himself down. Also, we didn't get to touch on it, but our favorite thing, I think, is the efficiency of Ethan Hunt. Oh, also, we're sliding into a Dutch angle here, so you know something's about to happen. But as he was coming up, when he wanted to secure his little safe house, he broke a light bulb with his jacket and just scattered around the glass. And that's just... It's so utilitarian. It's so
because it
functional.
does this exact moment. It alerts him to somebody coming because he can hear the glass crunching under their feet. And it's just Ethan and his wits against the world, and it's incredible.
Oh boy.
And then there's this moment, which is, I think, fucking brilliant, because on the one hand, obviously, there's this sort of Ethan perspective it's putting into the fact that, like, he is definitely not okay. He's hallucinating and, like, having basically a waking trauma dream.
Yep.
But there's also the fact that this moment sets up the next time we see Phelps in this really important way, because when we see him next in the train station, there's a moment where you think, oh, it's just another hallucination. And it takes a long moment. You can actually see Ethan go through it until he touches Jim, and then he's like, holy shit, he's real. Even
incredible. Ethan thinks he's cracking up. And you could see, like, we haven't even touched on the fact that we've gone from, like, the soft, fun boy who's really flirtation stuff to this bundle of knives. Like, it would cut you to touch him for the rest of the movie, and it's really fantastic. Yeah.
And it's interesting that mention about it would cut you to touch him, because basically the only person who does touch him after this point in the movie is Claire. Who we see in this moment. This
who does it very deliberately.
Yes. This is one moment that we sort of yell at De Palma about every time. It's sort of it's in some ways understandable, but yes, it's definitely unnecessary how far it goes. It's really creepy. It's one of those moments of, like, sexual violence undertones that we don't expect from MI and that we don't like. But it is interesting because it plays into this dynamic that is already sort of being set up, that there is something romantic or sexual going on with Ethan and Claire even before this trauma, that there is something going on even from that first scene where he sort of cups her face. There's an implication that they have something going on, and that it sort of aligns with Jim sort of mentoring Ethan. It aligns with Ethan's hero worship of Jim. It aligns with this sort of, like, already established dynamic between Claire and Jim. There's just sort of, like, it feels very much like this is not something that's just happening, but something that is based on.
Yeah, because the very first hint that we get is him reaching out to touch her face while she's waking up from the drug thing. But the next one we get is him very casually leaning over both of them their shoulders, being very, like, ensconced between the two of them, smiling as they joke with each other. And it's like, you go from, oh no, is he, like, getting in with the boss's girl? And then it's like, oh no, something else entirely might be going on. And, like, I'm going to draw the very fine line. And it's like, Phelps is an older man who is, like, married to a young, dark-haired agent who works as a honey trap, and also has a young protege who is about her same age, has dark hair, and works as a honey trap. Both people who rely on him. There is a power dynamic there that is pretty fucked up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how exactly you read or you imagine that dynamic working out is really up to you. How you imagine what they were like before you see them in MI1 is really up to you. I have a little headcanon here. My personal belief is that, which I think is really crunchy, is that Jim probably set up Ethan and Claire fucking, but refused to actually touch Ethan himself because he's sort of good old boy and he's a little bit too homophobic for that. I just think that sounds right to me.
Mm-hmm. Dunhill Lighter. Dunhill
Lighter, and the man who we know now, we called him Fabio when we were talking in Ghost Protocol. His name is actually Gunther. I'm so sorry. But there is this hilarious moment where he's in this awful coat, huge coat, and then we get the first example of that ridiculous mask.
I love it so much. Because, yeah, if you don't remember, in Ghost Protocol, when Ethan wanders off after everything goes to shit in Dubai, he makes a phone call and he's like, yeah, Dunhill Lighter, I'll be there. And it turns out it's the same dude. That's like such a massive gap in time. It's like these guys just happen to remember each other.
It's the same dude, and he literally has this exact same fucking creepy mask, which is so unnecessary. It's so unnecessary to make it look like a fucking serial killer mask for no reason. But it makes me happy. It does.
Like, there's no way it's not deliberate. So it's like,
yes.
After this, they just, I guess they stay in touch over the years, over the literal decades. It's important to have friends out in the field.
Yes, this is also a really juicy part of this movie.
I love this scene.
We're getting into, again, sort of what we're talking about with Ethan using his wiles, his sexuality to get what he wants. And him also sort of like being trained first and foremost as an actor or as sort of someone who can talk his way out of trouble rather than attack his way out of trouble. Mm-hmm. This is Max.
Yes. We love Max. Max is fucking phenomenal.
Yeah. Max is so good. And it's so fantastic how he is literally tied to a chair in this scene. And yet he's clearly feeling great about it. He's like, he feels like he's still on the right track. He's still doing what he needs to do. And there's actually a particular moment where, in this coming up, where Max will like touch his ear. And it's like, oh, he's got her. Like, she is this older woman. Again, this sort of like interesting dynamic where like Ethan is sort of like the honey trap. And yet he can just use his like cocky smile and his like his intense eye contact.
And making the offer, basically, that she'll take, because why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also,
so
I do love... Oh, is this where I'm gonna get the little ear touch? But, like, also in the scene, this is where I think you really start to see, like, Ethan shaking... No, I'm trying to figure out the way to phrase it. This is where he starts to become very, very flinty. Very, very sharp. And in that way that... there it is. He knows he's won. Yeah, he's good at his job. But there's throughout this entire sequence, he's almost like difficult to look at because there's something just underneath the surface. Like the wrong word is going to set him off.
Yeah, like it's painful to look at him because he looks so on edge and he looks like he's literally a knife balanced on another fucking knife. Like,
yeah. Especially because we've already been shown what it's like when he's not like that. We already have a glimpse of, like, the softer boy. But no, we're in the grimdark times. Now Ethan's mean. Now he's a smile with a knife.
Yeah.
Also, not sufficient reason to have a Dutch angle.
No, not really. But that's always interesting, that Jack Rabbit's line. It's just like... it has to be a sexual connotation, right? It's playing into the fact that this is all very much him flirting with Max.
Really, I just thought it was being disparaging of the CIA, because I always assumed that we're being disparaging of the CIA.
The thing is, specifically jackrabbits, to me sounds like, it immediately makes me think of, like, fucking like rabbits. Like, that is the immediate association that I have with that, and I can't imagine that specific word was not used intentionally.
Still not sufficient reason to use a Dutch angle. She's great, though.
She is great. Oh, and it's very interesting. We talked about this a little bit in the Fallout commentary, but I actually looked it up, and this movie obviously came up out in 1996, and Vanessa Kirby, who plays the White Widow in Fallout, was actually born in 1988. So if the character, the White Widow, is only 8 years younger than Vanessa Kirby actually is, which is a completely reasonable amount for an actress to be playing, then it's actually completely possible that the White Widow was conceived this year when this happened. Just saying.
Yeah, and I feel like there's no... I don't know why else McQuarrie would make her specifically Max's daughter, except to make us all, just for a moment, go, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I love this cleaning lady. Every time I see her, it's like, she does not give a shit.
She's like, I'm gonna fucking clean this rug, you go around me.
Mm-hmm. She, like us, hates the CIA.
Everybody hates the fucking CIA.
Because they suck.
Although it's interesting, in this movie, there is the least amount of definition between the CIA and the IMF. Because Kittredge is technically IMF, but he acts way more like the CIA. And actually, we see later, breaking into IMF mainframe is literally the same thing as breaking into CIA headquarters. They are, located in the same place.
It's almost like the IMF is like a special task force more than its own organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to think about how that develops over the course of the movies.
Mm-hmm. I love him.
I know. He's such an asshole.
He has so much charm in this role.
He is. I think you said at one point he's electric, and I agree. Like, you just have to watch him because he's just so dynamic.
Yeah. He almost feels like he could be a match for Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh god, I love this. Everything about the body language in this fucking sequence is great. And almost,
I feel like
almost
this
looks
is very
calmer.
Yes, I feel like this version of Ethan that we see in this scene is almost directly the type of Ethan that you are trying to channel in the early chapters of the fic that we're both working on. I think this is the Ethan who can turn on his charm and expects to get what he wants when he does that. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And also there's just... Go ahead.
I love that line about the warm blanket. She's bringing in a tactile element to it when she's sitting right next to him, and they keep looking at each other, and it's like, yeah, we know where this is going to go.
Yeah. Literally, I do not know. I think... So there's literally a line later. I have to believe that they fuck in the back of this car, or that they stop somewhere at the end of this car trip and fuck, because there's literally a line later where, like, she implies, like, oh, I hope we get to meet again in private. Like, no, they're definitely having sex.
Yeah. Listen, you do what you have to for the job, and sometimes work is a pleasure. Like, it's fine.
Yep.
Nice stack of money. I really like her, like, little suit jacket thing.
It is interesting. I like it too. This is another scene where it's really interesting to read what Claire is doing. If you know Claire's actual motives in this movie, reading everything she does as placing herself on Ethan's side.
Yeah, because he literally just said, I have to go get the necklace, and she's like, okay, we have this many bullets. She switches it from him to them instantly because she doesn't want to lose her grip on this.
And it's interesting that they set this up as they're both basically trying to get revenge for what happened to Jim, which is, again, that really interesting sort of like threesome dynamic of like, no, they're his lovers. They are like trying to get revenge. Yeah. And,
she's trying to loop him into the mourning and to being the widow, basically. Mm-hmm. It's like, we're in this together. We both are sharing this trauma. Obviously, we have to stick together.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tasty. It's crunchy.
Ah, look who it is! Luther!
It's Luther! Yeah, forget the intelligent commentary. It's Luther! Look, guys!
Okay, I will say a little bit of intelligent commentary. So one of the other things that dossier in MI1 DVD Extras says is that specifically the thing that brought Ethan to Phelps' attention, supposedly, I don't know whether I personally agree with this, but supposedly, is that Ethan apparently pulled off the greatest prank in CIA history because he impersonated the like guy who was running the graduation ceremony, and then he refused to shake anybody's hands. But the specific language in the dossier is like, there's no technically physical evidence that he did this, but it's highly suspected, and it drew the attention of Jim Phelps. And I think that's so fascinating because that is literally what Luther and Ethan bond over in this moment, is like, Ethan's like, oh, but you pulled off something fucking phenomenal. And Luther's like, but there was no physical evidence. It was cool, but there was no physical evidence. I love that they're just meeting on that level at this very first meeting.
Yeah. He's already in love with Luther, because look at him, obviously.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
He's like, oh, so somebody who's smarter than me and who could help me with tech things and who has beautiful eyes. I'm good. Mm-hmm.
I also love this leather jacket that Ethan wears in several scenes in this movie. It just looks so comfortable and so lived in, and I love it because I think in some ways a lot of these outfits read to me less as working outfits or less as sort of like armor than as like his clothes that he's wearing because he has them and because they comfort him. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, he wears a lot of comfy clothes in this. It's very interesting, especially in contrast to later Ethan, who is like, I have a black shirt, I have a black jacket, and I'm ready to go.
Yep.
Oh, I want an artificial intelligence risk chip. I want 7 of them.
I think that's called my brain. It is also interesting when we know how this is actually set up, that we know that Claire is actually doing a lot in this scene to keep Krieger looped into this whole decision-making process, because obviously Claire knows that Krieger is already working with Jim and that she needs him to be sort of the double agent on this job. So it's really interesting how, like, it's set up as Ethan and Luther obviously loves of their lives, but also Claire and Krieger are sort of subtly aligned once you know what's happening.
Yeah, and it's like, as like, you know, Ethan and Luther just like hit it off so splendidly, it's almost like she wants to make sure that the rest of them don't become a third wheel. Mm-hmm. She doesn't want like them to like be like pushed off to the side, because she needs to stay in on this mission, and she needs Krieger to stay in on this mission. If these two go off on their own, her entire plan is fucked.
Yep. This set is so cool. Mm-hmm. It's very, to me, very like Star Wars. It feels like a little bit like the trash compactor in Star Wars, a little like, I'm not even sure which set it is, but one of the like Imperial Death Star sort of areas. It feels very much like that to me, and I love it so
with
much.
the strange shapes and stuff. Yeah,
and
also the fact that it's like, yeah, the CIA is definitely the Imperials, right?
Yeah, and it's like the white squares. It's just like, it's very much just like, it makes me almost, it looks like a stormtrooper uniform as a room, you know?
I love the ridiculous floor that changes colors for no reason.
Yes, I also love this specific shot that's setting up specifically that a single drop of water can set off the alarm, because obviously it works so well when we then have the scene later that is just incredibly tense, where Ethan is sweating because he's exerting himself and he's stressed out, and he basically has to catch the water droplet, because we know from this scene just now that even that single water droplet would set off the alarm. I love that.
Yes.
God, I'm so insane about this movie.
I think Luther looks very cute in his little fireman drag. It's very adorable.
Yeah, definitely.
Now we're just going to pull just a straight up Leverage.
Yep.
Like, I've seen this episode of Leverage. I think it's in the last season. See, this is what Luther does.
Oh,
you said in the past that you're not certain what he does.
I feel that considering the last scene set it up as like Luther is so integral to hacking this mainframe, I feel like he doesn't do enough in the actual room to like hack anything, and that sort of bothers me.
Well, he's basically hacked the Pentagon at this point.
Yeah, like he does all of the background work.
Yeah. Without him, they wouldn't have any of this. Mm-hmm. And they need eyes for this to work.
Yeah. I will also say I noticed just now when Ethan was the fireman talking to the front desk person, there's this interesting thing also in the dossier that like Ethan's thing supposedly is like disguises and accents, which clearly basically never comes up again. So we sort of suspect that that's because maybe based on his Virginia senator earlier, maybe TC personally is not that good at accents, so they just sort of like left that out of the character in later movies.
And like he would rather, drive a motorcycle off a cliff than spend 6 weeks with a dialect coach. That's fine.
It's also, I think it's very funny that they obviously have to have that accents component because this is way too early to have the voice chip technology that we get in later movies. But basically, as soon as they could come up with a reason why no one would have to do an accent or no one would have to pretend to be someone else and pretend to make their voice, they did it.
Yeah. Listen, he's a talented man. He does many things, just not accents. Oh, very good character moment.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Macquarie actually talks, I think in one of the commentaries, or I believe, about how this specific moment, that like 0 body count, is so important, and they took that as really one of the vital things to their interpretation of Mission Impossible as, no, the point is Ethan wants to do everything without violence first. Like, violence is always the last option.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we particularly railed against in MI2 and MI3, the fact that it really feels like it's a shoot first, ask questions later type of style that doesn't fit with how
Ethan Hunt should never have an assault rifle. He just shouldn't. He would rather run away and try again a different way than to take an assault rifle and start shooting people. I'm a complete no-sell on it. Like, this is the guy who's his MO is to be sneaky. He's a cat burglar first, and then maybe you'll get him to shoot a pistol if, all other attempts fail.
I also just want to point out these little suckers that he uses to get up this shaft.
Yeah, they work really good, huh?
Because it really emphasizes in an intentional way, because we know Brad Bird did this on purpose. In Ghost Protocol, he made all of the technology shitty. It would be so easy. He could have so easily, no problem at all, climbed the Burj Khalifa with those little suckers. But he didn't have that, and instead he had those stupid sticky gloves that sucked. And,
analog is always better than digital.
Yeah.
Look at him go.
Yeah.
And
great.
also he's already wearing the slutty glasses, thank God.
I know. I was going to say that. This is a really great outfit for Ethan, partially because of the slutty glasses, partially because, obviously, as we'll see once he gets down into the room, he is wearing a corset. It's unmistakable.
Yes.
And it's so good. I just think more pretty boys should wear corsets. That's just all I'm saying.
It looks great on him, and it's very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, we love the corset, but also it makes complete sense to be wearing one for this mission. So,
yeah, it makes sense given the sort of physical activity that he's doing. I fucking love
it's your favorite. It's your favorite.
It's my favorite gadget. The fact that they can unscrew the screw from the inside and catch it before it falls down.
Yep.
I fucking love that.
I want one of those. I've built computers, and I would fucking love to have one of those damn things. Oh, God.
I also love, I don't know who came up with this, whoever came up with the idea of they have to be completely silent in the room. Mm-hmm. I want to kiss them on the mouth because, holy shit, this scene is so much more intense because it's quiet, and it's almost hard for us as commentators to talk over it because it feels so wrong. It feels like you should just be quiet and just pay attention and feel really tense.
Yeah, because we don't want to fuck it up for him. He's working so hard.
Yeah. And it just works so well. And it's so different than what you would expect from a movie like this. Like, you would always think like an action movie, you would think it would have, like, at the very least a score. And so the fact that they have it completely silent, I think is really great. And obviously people liked it because it ended up being a core component of Mission Impossible going forward, is they almost always have a silent scene. Yeah.
The McQuarrie trilogy, they always have one of them. I don't know if we got one in 2. I don't think they cared. I remember we found one in 3, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was either.
Come on, show me the suspension gear. I'm fascinated with this scene and the physicality porn of it.
Yeah,
this like my favorite thing. I've watched this scene so many times.
Yeah, this is Ark's favorite scene in this movie for sure.
Oh yeah, without question. Yeah. Like, everything about the way the rig works, like, when he's dropping down here, if you watch this in HD, you can see, like, the way he's, like, keeping himself in place by pressing his ankles against the cord so that he can be lowered safely, because he's on a pivot that he can spin around on, and that's incredible. It's actually a really incredible suspension rig.
Yeah, like, it's mounted basically at his waist, and he has to keep his body, again, this is the reason why the corset makes sense, he has to keep his body completely tense and in control so that he doesn't fall out of balance and doesn't disturb the rig. And it makes this whole sequence, you can feel the tension, not just in the situation, but literally in Ethan's body.
Yeah. He's just gonna hang out there.
There's also, it's really interesting. So he pulls up really fast here, completely silently. The first couple of times I watched this, I was really confused why he was able to go up silently here, but when he gets pulled up later, it makes a lot of noise, and that's a whole important thing. It's because, actually, when Krieger hits yeah, I love it. When Krieger drops the line in order to attack the rat for no fucking reason,
Rat was not doing anything. Yeah.
The rat was not doing anything. Krieger's just an asshole. He actually breaks part of the pulley rig that they are using to let Ethan down, so that the part of the pulley that lets Ethan down actually breaks, and he is instead resting on the edge of the vent, and that's why it's so much louder when he's being pulled back up.
Yeah. I just love all the shots of, like, look, he's bracing against the cables to keep himself steady. It's so good.
I do love this also because it's not super easy to see, but he's wearing this, like, full-length leotard. He's also wearing these, like, lovely, slutty little black shorts. I do adore that.
Yeah, the shorts are, like, ridiculous. Everything about this outfit is a 10 out of 10. It's so functional and also is very good for us specifically.
And the shoes are almost like ballet slippers in some ways. Like, they look so soft-soled, and it's just so tasty.
Yeah.
And then this very slow...
gently spinning.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, look at that. That's so good.
Thank you De Palma for this. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is for me, specifically. I'm being doxxed and I'm okay with it.
Oh yeah, you should tell them about the actual filming of the scene so that they'll know what's happening when we see it later.
Oh, it's so fucking funny. So, like, obviously the entire thing is practical, which is part of why I find it so impressive, because you can literally just see him doing all the motions, and you can see how this entire sequence is done. So, when the cable drop happens, the infamous cable drop, Cruise kept fucking it up. TC kept, like, when they would drop him, he would bang his head against the floor. Every time. And it was really, really frustrating. And, hold on, this beautiful coast backwards and then just lower.
He just loves being suspended. He just loves being cradled by the ropes.
Yeah, I think he could take a nap like that.
Yeah.
So when they do the cable drop and he kept banging his head on the ground, and eventually De Palma was like, listen, obviously you can't do this, and that's fine. What we'll do is we'll do a shot of the drop and then cut, and then have it cut to you already hovering above the ground. And TC was like, no, just give me literally one more shot, just one more shot. And then he left the set. He went to talk to, I can't remember if it was the stunt people or the craft service people, to get pound coins, because they were filming this in at Pinewood Studios, I think, in England. So he got a bunch of pound coins and put them in his shoes, and then did it on the next shot.
And it was just enough to balance him out so that he didn't hit his head on the floor. And you can see, even then, he's still struggling in real life so much to stay level and not to hit anything. And it really comes across so well. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. And this is why practical is always the way to go.
Yeah, because you can literally see him straining, and there he is. Shot of the corset. Shout out to the fucking corset.
Mm-hmm.
And
very
also
Metal Gear.
And also, the two discs obviously come up later in my favorite scene of this film, or possibly even Mission Impossible generally. The two disc scene that we get into later is so good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, here's Krieger who's going to be an idiot. And also
I love
there's
the
that
moment of Luther seeing what Ethan's downloading. It's like, oh my god.
Yeah. And he doesn't actually say anything, but clearly Ethan picks up on how freaked out Luther is, because again, it comes up later that Ethan's like, oh, I know you wouldn't have gone through with this if you'd known what we'd been doing. And it's a really important moment.
Drop!
And I love how not pretty it is. I love how he's not making an intense, focused face. He's just straining, and he's just I gotta.
Yeah, you can see the tension in his neck as he's just trying to keep himself in position. Mm-hmm. And that's real, baby.
And that somehow reminds me of, I remember that at one point on Tumblr it went around that Joss Whedon, while filming one of the Avengers movies, was telling the female Avengers don't act so aggressive when you're fighting. Make sure you're fighting prettily. Ugh. And that stuck with me. Right, of course, fucking Joss Whedon. But it stuck with me because this seems like the opposite. This is absolutely... Ethan is being ugly in how much he's trying not to hit the ground. Mm-hmm. And I love that.
It is fascinating that you make the comparison between female fighting characters and Ethan Hunt. It's almost like there's a gender thing there.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely noticed that as well.
Yeah. I wonder, does cat burglar tend to have a female connotation?
Yeah, so this is something that we thought about actually when we were thinking about it the last time we recorded this. In some ways, Ethan's backstory that we get from the oh, this is so good. He catches it. Ethan's backstory from the dossier, the way Ethan uses his wiles, all these things. Ethan is basically a Bond girl in this movie.
Yep. I remember when we had that realization. Yep.
It's so good. Once you realize. Yeah.
Sorry. That shot of him slowly being lifted and looking around is literally gorgeous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Ethan is basically a Bond girl. And that means that at the end, this basically means that the Bond girl defeats Bond, in this case Jim Phelps, and becomes the leader of her own series. Uh-huh. I fucking adore that. Yeah, the gender of it all.
Oh, the tension of it.
Yeah, we have disagreements in our personal group when watching this. Why he got this knife out? Was he going to, once Ethan was in the vent, cut him free? Was he going to stab Ethan? Obviously, the knife had to be there, both to alert the actual person who belongs in that room, and because the knife is a very important plot point. But it's always interesting if you think about it. Like, why did Krieger even have that knife out? What was he going to do?
He just like got scared by a rat, and he just needs something to help him feel secure again. So he needs to have his knife,
and he had to still have it in his hand, even though he'd just been using two hands to pull the rope up. He had to grab it again.
As soon as he doesn't need to be using both hands, he's like, "I need my knife." It's like his pet toy. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's not evil. He just likes knives. Oh, now you fucked up.
Yeah, I love how good this guy is. There are a couple really good, like, Muppet faces in this movie of people just being like, oh, fuck. I think it's very good. I do like the sort of situation room thing that they have. Like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's assumed that it's in Langley. I just like that it feels very War Games to me.
Yes. Which is miles better than everything in MI3. I fucking hate the IMF set in MI3 so much. Mm-hmm. Just, it looks like the set of Bones.
This is such a good scene. I love Kittredge. I love how this scene is set up where it's clearly like two shots somehow like overlaid. I don't know how they did this at that point without sort of like, I don't know. But
just mail him his clothes is
just mail him his clothes is he's not so going fucking home. Good.
He's not getting home tonight.
He's going straight to fucking Alaska. I think that's so good. Okay. This is my favorite scene.
Yeah, this is your scene.
This is so good. I think it's so important as a character moment. I love it. It's just a joy to watch. It's so good. I also fucking love this outfit. He has variations of this outfit. He wears it for the next couple of scenes. It has the jacket that I mentioned earlier that looks so soft and comfortable. And then there's this sort of like blue-gray, like very slutty V-neck sweater underneath.
It's a deep V-neck.
It's a deep V-neck.
It's like, hello, I have a clavicle. Would you like to see it?
And it also, again, looks so soft. It's very, like, it's slutty, but it's also sort of like Sweater Boy at the same time. I love it. And here's Krieger being an asshole. But specifically, he's being an asshole because Ethan's being an asshole. And I sort of love that. That's something that I really love about the scene is that Ethan knows that sometimes being an asshole is actually the best way to manipulate someone. And I think that's so cool.
And that's the way you know that he's actually good at his job. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs a slightly different touch.
Yep.
Which also kind of pairs out when he becomes a leader. He handles everyone a little differently. Mm-hmm. Like he makes out with Benji before every mission. And
oh, and we do also know, I don't remember where I heard this, but we do know this scene is actually, again, fully practical. He does actually do the sleight of hand. It's not cuts, which just makes me love it even more.
Yeah, and you can tell because, like, the camera loves to linger on him doing all this shit. It's really good.
I love how much of an asshole
smile.
His entire face is. He's just such a little dickhead, and I love it so much.
Mm-hmm. He knows he's insufferable and is playing it up as much as possible.
Yes, he's playing up being insufferable because unlike Claire, who in this situation she's using, like, the connection between her and Ethan to manipulate him, he in this case is instead playing the card of, like, I'm so far above you, Krieger, that you can't even imagine, like, what level I'm working on. You can't even think about being ahead of me. I'm so far ahead of you. And it's just a fascinating way that he gets what he wants in a way that you don't typically expect. I don't know, I love it.
He is a guile hero. Like, there's no need to have a gun in this. He's just going to play people.
Yep. And it's also this moment right now where he's going to pick up his Bible and see that it's from the Drake Hotel is so important, both immediately and later on. Obviously, from a plot point later on, I think it's important. But I also think immediately it becomes important because I think he basically unravels to a certain degree. Not the details, but he unravels that Jim is behind everything at this exact moment.
Yes.
And you can almost see it when Claire, I think, is going to walk over in a second. And he's going to not react to her the same way he's reacting to her.
Because he was just playful, he was just flirty, he was just having fun with her and roping her into his little performance because they're both performers.
He's just frozen.
Yeah. And she comes in and she touches him and he still isn't reacting, so she draws him in closer because she has to keep a hold of him or else this entire thing is going to fall apart. She's so tremendously good at what she does.
Yeah, it's so good. And yet he is not taken in by it because in the next moment he turns to Luther and Luther asks, did Krieger have the necklace after all? And he doesn't say yes or no. He just nods so that there's no way that Claire in the other room could hear. I think that is 100% deliberate. Yeah. In this moment, he's already thinking, she could be betraying me.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he knows the play. He knows how to manipulate people. And he can see that it's being done to him.
Yeah. And I also love that we've talked about this before, I think, but his entire plan hinges on
Luther being a good man.
Yes, it's so good. He knows from the word go that Luther is the one he can trust. Luther is someone who knows will not manipulate anything, who will just do the right thing, and it's so incredible that his is entire immediate.
This entire plan hinges on Luther being a good man, or else it will fall apart. And Ethan probably didn't even understand that he was a good man until that moment in Langley when he was, suspended from a fucking cable and heard Luther have a reaction to seeing the knock list. It's good shit.
Yeah. And it doesn't even fully make sense in some ways because there's no reason for Luther to trust Ethan here either, right?
I mean, on some level, does he need Luther to trust him? He just needs to trust Luther.
Well, the thing is, from Luther's perspective, he has no reason to think that Ethan isn't going to actually sell the knock list. There's no reason that he would understand why Ethan is not actually wanting it to get out in the open unless either they've had a conversation about it or unless Luther somehow implicitly knows that Ethan is playing the other two or is playing Max. There's just there's so many fucking layers. I love it. There's also, I love that scene of him walking across the street in the rain. It's so good.
And it makes him look so great in this scene.
He looks so good. He looks so unhinged.
Yes. Hi, Jim. Oh, wait, that wasn't Jim. That was, Jim has a tan coat.
Yeah. It's so good seeing him in this scene, playing off Kittredge, and you can see how tightly wound he is. He's almost not even mad. He's annoyed. He's like, how dare you touch my family? And yet, the thing that he points out is that it makes no fucking sense. No sense, because you think that he betrayed and killed his entire team, and yet you think that he's going to care about his mom being in jail. And it's such a good moment that he's like, you're being a fucking idiot. Stop wasting my time.
Yeah. It's another moment of him, the way he handles Kittredge is similar to how he handles Krieger. There's a smidge more respect here, obviously, but, it's a level of, you're not on my level. Call me when you're ready to be on my level, basically. And I really like that.
I love how fucking smart Ethan is in this movie, right? I've said it before. You have to deal with the fact that Ethan is so much dumber in MI2 and MI3 because the Ethan in this movie is so fucking smart that if he stayed this level of smart, MI2 and MI3 would go completely differently. Yeah.
Yep.
And
here we have the moment. Yeah, the fact that they lean all the way and do a horror sting, the way this is framed, the way he moves away, is like he's actually meeting a ghost.
And watching Ethan's face is so good.
And here's the moment where he's like, oh shit.
Touching. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, this is not a phantom.
Yeah.
This is my other favorite scene. This one is incredible. This is just Tom Cruise fucking soul gazing me for like 90 seconds.
Okay. Tell us about the soul gaze arc. Do it.
Okay. So a soul gaze, like, this is something that I see a lot in fiction. I don't know if it's like factual, but it's something I've seen in a lot of different shows and a lot of different books and stuff, is the idea of like when somebody is a con artist or a honey trap, one of the things that they will do is that they will look directly into a person's eyes and hold for a long time. And the idea is that it's supposed to engender, like, completely against your will, like not attraction to that person, but like wanting to be a kindred spirit with them. And that might be like wanting to bang them, but it also might just be having sympathy for that person. And like you see Claire do it constantly in this movie. She soul gazes Ethan over and over and over again, to the point where I'm pretty sure it's entirely intentional and that it is a thing tacitly in this movie. And it's a tactic that he uses too. And
I think it's actually hilarious because if you look up TC's Wikipedia page, it actually says that long, intense eye contact is one of his, like, actor trademarks, which I think is so hilarious. Like, literally soul gazing is like his thing. I think that's funny.
I mean, he's riveting here as he's like, he's staring into our eyes and basically like showing us what he's figuring out. Like, I think the first time we watched this, we didn't quite understand what was happening because we were, overwhelmed and dumb. But like now we see like Ethan is Phelps is telling Ethan a story, and instead of listening to it, Ethan is figuring out everything that happened that night in Prague, piece by piece.
He's figuring it out, and he's sort of also having a flashback at the same time. It's like he's intentionally thinking this is how it could have happened, but it's also so emotionally intense that like that flash just now, you can see how close his eyes are. It's like there's also an intense emotional reaction happening here. Yeah.
Putting the pieces together with the knife. He knows that Krieger was there. Everything is starting to click together. Because they're still having like a normal conversation where Ethan is like basically going along with what Phelps is telling him, but it's not what's going on internally with him. Yeah. They are literally having about 3 different conversations at the same time.
And I love this shot specifically because you see Ethan understand that Claire probably killed Hannah, and then
next cut,
backtrack.
It's Claire, and then we immediately cut to Ethan's face, and he has this. Yep, he's like, nope, no.
It could have been a different way. It didn't have to, and you can see Jim being like, oh shit, thank God he isn't onto me yet. But we're never quite sure how much Jim buys this sort of like the narrative that Ethan is saying out loud. Because I think it's implied that Jim sort of knows what Ethan is actually thinking. But it's so interesting how he basically rewrites it for himself because he can't accept that Claire killed her. So he says, well, it's possible that it went a different way. And he literally imagines it in a different way. And, it's so good. It's so juicy.
Oh, and here's like this great moment.
Yes. This moment is so good because you have Jim Phelps basically projecting his own reason for going rogue onto Kittredge. And basically his reasoning is, I'm not in charge anymore. I don't get control over everything.
And the pay sucks.
and the pay sucks, and I'm in a bad marriage.
That's the that's because we have no indication at this point that Kittredge is married, but we do know that there's a marriage here. It is such intense projection.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's so good. And it's so interesting because Ethan clearly knows that this is what's happening. He knows that Jim is basically explaining why he's doing this. And it's so great. Like you said, there are like 3 different conversations happening here.
I love that little moment of congratulations and how like I think like Phelps is genuinely impressed that he managed to get the Nautilus, and Ethan is just like, the fact that he's being praised by his mentor, and it just makes him slightly flinch instead of like make him feel good. It's like we've already passed a point of no return between them. Even if Phelps had somehow pulled the wool over Ethan's eyes, which obviously doesn't happen, the trust is already broken. Yeah.
It's broken, and there's also this important moment, again thinking about this weird threesome dynamic, is Jim basically saying like, oh, you're better for Claire than me. Like, you're young. You're thinking that, you're better for her. I should just stay dead, basically.
For the mission.
And it's just like, it's so interesting because, again, there seems to be this clear dynamic. He says later that, like, do not covet thy neighbor's wife. And yet at the same time, it seems very clear that he's setting them up together, right? He knows that they have something going on, and he's approving of that too. It's so
because
good.
this is his hook in Ethan. Like, this is the way that he controls Ethan, is through like creating the situation where he's lost Jim, and then also like basically having Claire step in to comfort him, which leads into this scene, which is the most fucked up scene in the movie. This scene makes me so intensely uncomfortable. It makes me want to scream at Ethan to run away. It is so well done. Yeah. Even like the way the camera like you could look at Ethan right here, and you can see like all the edges of him. The way the light glints off him is very sharp. They're using a specific lens to make everything look sharp. But when it goes back to Claire, they're using a softened lens, so everything is kind of like floaty, and it feels like a soap commercial. That's also extremely deliberate. We are very much in Ethan's like perspective, and the way that he sees her is not true. It is this softened, idealized image, and she knows it. She's been working very hard to keep this boy under her thumb.
She looks like a poor orphan waif, and she does this like little grabby hands movement, which I can't get over, because literally she's just like, she's playing this completely innocent act, and the camera is literally helping her. The camera is like, oh, she is soft, she is hurting, she is like on the floor needing something, and basically like looking for comfort from Ethan, and Ethan has this awful look on his face, which, Ark, I think you said, it's like that moment, and I think it was Fallout, where literally you can hear Ethan screaming behind his eyes. Like,
if I put my head against, my ear against his head, I could hear him screaming inside. It is the exact same feeling between the two of them.
Yeah.
So good. And this is the point where, Ethan gives him the tickets, isn't it?
He gives him the tickets, and he gives him the watch that looks out of the slutty glasses. Which I love how it's shot, how they just barely don't reveal what that watch is, but they do it in such a subtle way that you can believe that it's just sort of not important or just out of shot or whatever. But it's enough that what I really appreciate in this movie is that there are things like the drunken couple early on in the mission, where they're giving you the hints to be able to put these things together yourself.
Especially when they do the thing where one of them reaches up to their ear, and it's like,
Yeah.
Okay.
It feels in some ways very much like almost like a mystery novel, in the sense that they give you the pieces where you could put it together yourself, and it's just, they count on you being so distracted by how much is happening, you can't quite do it in time. And I love it because it makes it feel very realistic that Ethan is just a little bit faster, a little bit smarter, and he can put it together in time.
Yes, and that's our favorite Ethan, is when he's not like a mastermind in the manifestation of destiny, blah-de-blah. When he is, he's 10 minutes ahead, he's a half hour ahead, he's an hour ahead, depending on what's going on. I still want the laptop that is also a briefcase. I think that'd be great. I would like one of those, please.
I'm not a huge fan of briefcases. I want it to be, I don't even know. I want it to be a laptop with a smaller laptop inside.
Okay.
Like a big bulky laptop, like it's like
yeah, like a
the
ThinkPad,
2000s?
like the thing that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
ThinkPads, you could, if I swung a ThinkPad at you, you would die. I had one of those. It was my first laptop. They're terrible and great.
I want inside that a little mini like notebook, and I want whatever this is, this like disk drive that they have, so that you have basically all of your peripherals inside the laptop with you. I think that's great. Oh, and also
her being so excited, so
yes.
into it, and she's like, I hope this doesn't preclude a meeting in private. It's like, yeah, they banged,
Yes.
guys. This is like not even up for debate. They banged,
And I love it because it's again one of those things where ever since the team ends, you see that every single other relationship, except for Luther, every single other relationship Ethan has in this movie is so fucked up. Because it's like Claire, obviously. Jim, obviously. Krieger, yeah, he's manipulating him. And even Max is like, well, I'm sending Job to kill you, basically, but I hope we meet again sometime. And it was nice fucking you. And it's just like, it's so great that it's basically just like, yeah, he is... There's no one he can trust except Luther. I think that's so fucking cool.
Mm-hmm. To be fair to Max, like, she will be perfectly happy if he survives. She'll be thrilled. She's just not going to lift a finger to do anything about it.
And she's actually fairly straightforward about, like, oh yeah, I mean, he'll find you. He'll probably kill you. And, like, she's not trying to hide that from him. She's just like, I don't really care about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you're super hot, so if you make it out okay, look me up.
Or look me up Ethan. In 22 years or whatever.
Oh, Ethan. He's just a very good honey trap. Like, I don't know, how, like, when you lay out everything that he does in this movie, he's just a honey trap. That is his MO, and that is what he does. He's a honey trap, and then he's a cat burglar for, like, a 20-minute segment. That's it.
He's a honey trap, a cat burglar, and he's an obnoxious asshole in a couple of scenes. That's it.
Yes.
He's a manipulative, obnoxious asshole.
And it's great. Yeah. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, he knows, because he gave him the fucking tickets. We're coming up to, like, the final thing with Claire, which is very heartbreaking, because, like,
it is.
This entire time, Ethan has kind of held out hope. Like, he knows. Deep down, he knows that Claire has been screwing with him this entire time. But he's like the Ethan that he will grow up into. He always holds out hope that a person is better than what he thinks. And he's always willing to, like, let them be better. It feels like he's more often disappointed than anything. Unfortunately.
It's almost the exact same thing he does with Walker, right? Like, he could know from the very beginning that he should basically ditch Walker or kill him, but he's not going to do that because he's always willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when he knows he really shouldn't.
Yeah. It's part of the... I mean, we could probably get into it at this point, that, like, this... The way that, like, the Ethan we see here leads into the Ethan that we know later. He is always the person who is willing to take a chance on someone. He's taking a chance on Claire here in the hopes that she hasn't been screwing him the entire time. And
I just have to mention, I love how this scene, obviously he can't speak. He doesn't have the voice technology. He can't speak because you'll know that he's not Jim. But he still plays it. He perfectly plays it. This long, long silence. He draws it out perfectly. Which is so
frustrating when we think about MI3, where we have a very similar scene where, like, for 30 seconds, he doesn't have the voice imprint thing uploaded, so he can't speak, and you watch him, like, fumble around and try to, like, basically cover for himself. And it's like, my guy, you've been doing this for
decades. Yeah, you know how to do this.
It's so frustrating when the writing is not as smart as we know Ethan can be.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets smart again. It's baffling.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking off that jacket. You look terrible. Oh boy. here's where the shit gets really, really strange and charged.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been talking the entire movie as if, like, this is, like, we're assuming if you're coming into this, you're, like, signing on to, like, yeah, there's a weird threesome thing here going on with a lot of interesting angles going on in the triangle. It's uncomfortable. The way,
I love this line for some reason. The damn Gideons. I fucking love that line for some reason. Just the way he says it is so good. But then this next line that's coming up. Oh, it literally makes me feel slightly ill every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Having tasted the goods is literally the most disgusting way you could have said that. It's so awful, and it makes you hate Jim even more, absolutely instantly. And it also adds this fantastic dynamic where, like, when you know the twist of this movie, you're going through and, like we've been doing, sort of analyzing how Claire is working on Jim's side. But that single line suddenly lays out that, oh, there's probably something really fucked up on the Claire-Jim side of this triangle as well. That, like, she's probably just Ethan a few years ahead. Like,
yes.
Oh, it's just so good.
Yeah, because, like, what would have happened between the three of them if Ethan hadn't figured it out? It's probably nothing good.
Yeah, like, if Ethan actually had taken over Phelps's unit, he would have basically, like, I don't even know, but it would have been insane to think about, like,
slutty glasses for the win.
Yeah, slutty glasses for the win. It would have been so good to see how Phelps basically kept them both under his thumb. Yeah. You can, I like that, like, they don't make it obvious that you should be uncomfortable with this whole dynamic until the very end, and you're like, oh, okay, now I can go back and rewatch it and be aware that I should be uncomfortable. Yes, and this moment where literally, even though she just told him that she betrayed him and that she's been manipulating him the entire time, he still tries to save her. It's just, that is the essence of Ethan. Old-a-thin, twig-a-thin, it's all the same. He will try and save people, and he will imprint on them, and he will do whatever he can, even when he knows it's pointless or there's no hope and all of these things.
Yeah. Because he's just a little bit doomed all the time. Ethan, you should really learn to not imprint on people, because let me tell you, buddy, in about 20 years, that's really going to fuck you over.
You know what's really interesting to me? That the other thing he doesn't do in this entire movie is kiss anybody. There are a lot of almost kisses with Claire, but there's no kisses and there are no shooting of a gun. I think that is fascinating.
Oh, so we can talk about the ace thing, right? Because yeah. So
yeah, let's do it.
Included in the queer reading of this movie is the fact that if you've listened to our other commentaries, you know that we read Ethan as super fucking ace, which, like, asexual means a lot of different things. It doesn't necessarily mean, like, being, like, sex averse. I actually don't read Ethan as sex averse. I think he just thinks of it as, like, another hobby that people can do. You interrupt the Netflix and chill to say, like, hey, I want to bang. And he's like, oh, okay, I thought we were watching a movie, but okay, sure. Like, that kind of blasé. And it's the apex of it is obviously in Fallout, because, my God, he comes off as incredibly ace there. We went through the entire thing with Vanessa Kirby's character. But even here, there's, like, there's the way that, what was the term that you used for, like, how this affects him and triggers that?
Traumagenic asexuality is the term that I feel like fits, because obviously you can be asexual and a slut, that's totally a thing, but for me it feels very, very much like this movie is him shifting from, oh, sex is fun, sex is, like, something that I enjoy doing and I'm actively attracted to people, to, like, I am so traumatized after everything that I've gone through in this movie that I will never look at sex in exactly the same way again. And obviously that is not how all asexuality works. That's not necessarily the only way you should depict sexuality, but I think it works here because it never feels like it's, it never feels like it's denigrating Ethan for that. It never feels like it's denigrating asexuality. It always feels like it's just saying, like, this is how it works for Ethan. And the way you love him still as Olithin, in a completely different way, but you love him just as much, I feel is very humanizing of that element. But yeah.
Because we often, like, we shy away from the idea that it comes from trauma because we don't want to, like, because sometimes people are just ace and it's fine. But in this specific situation, we are watching the trauma happen and the way that it unfurls around Ethan's character. And like, I'm always of the opinion that by the time we get to Ghost Protocol, we are finally reaching a point of, like, Ethan is settling into who he really is. Because it takes a long time for a person to realize who he really is. And I don't think he has in 2, that's for fucking sure. And 3 is a roller coaster of him learning a lot of lessons in the worst possible way, in the worst circumstances. But when we finally get to post-prison Ethan, so to speak, there's a genuine quality to him that I don't think we get any point before that.
There's like a settledness.
Yes. And, like, he's finally to a point where he can express himself in his own way that's true and that's truthful. It's and it's softer and it's kind. Like, that's the thing that I really like.
And it's ace as fuck.
Yes, it is. It is ace as fuck. Because, like, all of his, like, romantic inclinations in this, well, for one, Ghost Protocol straight up does not give him even an inkling of a love interest. It does not do it. It does not even play with that. It is settling the Julia thing. And then you go to Rogue Nation and you have Ilsa and Benji, and both of those are not handled in a sexual way. Like, his final goodbye to Ilsa is a hug and a good luck, basically. He's a lot more intimate with Benji, I would argue. But, and in Fallout, we still don't get a fucking kiss, even though that is, you know, almost explicitly wrapping up, like, his trauma with Julia so that he can theoretically, like, not get over it, but move onward and grow from it. Yeah. And even there, we don't get any kiss. So there's this repeated choice to make Ethan not a James Bond in a way that just reads as very ace.
It reads as very ace, and it's fascinating because in some ways, again, that sort of, like, gendered reading of this movie is that Ethan doesn't come across as that typical action hero, really at any point in this movie, because he's not the guy always getting the girl, he's not the guy seducing everyone, he's not the Bond, he's the Bond girl. Who
got to kill James Bond. Good for him.
Yes.
Now if only he got to kill MI6, by which we mean the IMF. Oh, we fucking hate the IMF so much.
I know. I am literally seeing Dead Reckoning tomorrow. I cannot fucking wait.
And I'm seeing it the day after, so yeah. Come on, McHugh. We believe in you.
I love this fucking Muppet Man. This Muppet Man who just collapses. Oh, so good.
Yeah. Ethan is our short ace king, basically.
Yes, incredible.
And I'm very happy for him with his boyfriends and his girlfriend. Entrapment.
Yes,
face.
I love that is what she's describing what happens with Ethan as. It's entrapment. Sure fucking is.
Oh yeah. They were entramping things all in that car ride. Don't even know what that means. I'm too ace for this joke. His entire team... Wait, I just realized that his entire team except Luther is dead again.
No, his entire original team is dead. Literally, every single person.
And also, his second team is dead except Luther.
That's true. Holy shit, I hadn't thought about that. That's true.
Yeah, Ethan, like... Maybe this is why he spends, like, 2 movies not really having a team. It's like, everybody ends up dead. Maybe I should just not.
Yeah. I love the color of this shirt so much. It's beautiful to me. I love this blue.
Just as much as I love the red on Luther.
I'm more of a burgundy sort of red person, but I do like how the red matches the building.
Yeah. And the blue. It's a very weird building.
That's so cool. That's neat how they both match the building.
Yeah. Tell us a lie, Ethan.
I know. I loved this, that Ethan says that he thinks of Luther as disreputable, even though the whole point is that he trusts Luther with his fucking life and with his honor and all this shit.
And with the entire fucking knock list.
Yeah.
And it paid off.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This final scene, back in this bizarre set, we have this really interesting moment where someone offers him a movie, and he says, no thanks. And then she says, what about the Cinema of the Caribbean or Aruba? And he has this sort of, like, realization. Ark, do you want to give your take on this?
I mean, he wants to go off on vacation, obviously, because, like, fuck the IMF. They completely screwed him over here in, like, 7 different ways. So he's like, peace out, guys. I'm leaving. And they're like, well, what if we give you a mission that's basically a vacation? Mm-hmm. And that's Aruba.
My interpretation is that this is basically Ethan, like, what he says to Luther is basically, I don't really want to go back. Like, I don't want to do the IMF anymore. And this moment is basically him realizing, oh, the IMF is not going to let me go. Like, I have to stay with them. They will find me on this plane. They will give me a new mission. It's not really a choice that I get
They
to
will
make.
find you if you go to Utah and start climbing the biggest rock possible and climb to the top. And then they will just shoot a rocket with a mission in
with
it.
With some glasses with a mission. Yeah.
Just, like I do like the implication that, like, Ethan can't get far enough away from the IMF for them to fucking leave him alone for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Remember when he decided he's gonna get married and, like, the first thing that happens is, like, Musgrave shows up in a convenience store? Like, how can I convince you to, like, not do that and instead be an agent again, actually?
Oh my god, they're so fucking evil. Just let my boy fucking rest.
Yeah. Ethan should get to destroy the IMF in Dead Reckoning Part 2. That is my hot take. And also, TC, if you want to make sure that nobody takes up your franchise after you leave it, fucking destroy the IMF, my guy. Just do it. Just do it. It'll be great. It'll genuinely be so fucking good.
Yeah. I really hope McQuarrie sinks this. I think it'll be so good.
Yeah. I trust McHugh. Yeah. So that's
all
all
right.
of our
Do you have any last thoughts on this? Anything we didn't talk about?
I love Ethan Hunt. Yeah.
I love the queer reading of this movie. I love how twisty it is. I love how crunchy it is. I love that basically once you're reading it like this, there is so much to unpack and there's so much going on. And like I said,
there's so much subtle acting in this. This movie is packed with subtle acting.
Yes, and it's like, I pointed out a couple of times in this movie, but there are so many things where they just perfectly set up a moment later on in this really great way, where it's like, oh, this is actually really tightly cut, tightly acted. Like, everything is so perfectly aligned so that it feels... like you're saying, it feels like we're inside Ethan's brain and everything is fitting into these, like, exact boxes that he's understanding things as. It's fucking incredible, and I love that, like, interpretation that, like, sorry, I do have to talk about one other thing.
Yeah,
which is, so I know that I talked about the dossier says that Phelps, got his attention drawn to Ethan through the prank. I have a personal headcanon that's slightly different than this.
Tell us your fanfic. Yeah.
I don't want to write a fanfic. I'm just going to tell it to you. So my interpretation instead, I think what happens is he's in school for theater. He's in a student play as like his senior thesis or something like that. And Jim happens to come to see it. And he immediately sees that Ethan is his type, yes, and young, dark-haired, very
easily
charismatic.
manipulated.
Yes. And so he comes up to Ethan afterwards, and he's like, well, just in case this, you're very talented, but just in case this acting thing doesn't pan out, here's my card. Just contact me if you ever want to set anything up. And and Ethan is sort of in the back of his mind thinking, like, I know that acting isn't a super safe career. Like, I left my family behind for this. Like, I know that it's not really a sure thing. It's probably pretty good. Like, this guy probably wants me to do porn, but, like, I should probably keep it in my back pocket just in case. And I don't know when, but at some point he's like, all right, fuck it. I just need to find out what this guy is offering me. And Jim is basically like, oh, no, nothing like that. Why don't you just meet me for coffee or meet at the gun range and we could just chat about things. And it becomes basically like Jim drawing Ethan like a spider into his like web of the IMF, and then Ethan gets invested and thinks, oh my god, I can do something really important here with all of my skills, and he's doomed forever.
Yes. I think it should be written, but I also understand that writing is hard.
Yeah, writing is fucking hard.
I've heard that, yeah. Once or twice. Okay, that's all of our commentaries. Yeah. So is this one your favorite?
I think Rogue Nation is the most enjoyable, the one that is most fun to watch. I think MI1 is the one that was sort of like the sleeper hit for me, the one that we did not expect to be this good.
It's like the puzzle piece finally getting into place, and suddenly you understand the whole picture.
Yes.
You need this piece.
Yeah, we were sort of ended up watching it on a whim. We're like, oh, it's probably going to be sort of like silly and like 90s. And it was like, oh my god, this is riveted. Incredible. Yeah. And it's just like, once you have that piece there, it's just, I will never be able to look at any of the rest of the movies the same way, because this is so foundational to Ethan Hunt as a person and as a character. So good. Mm-hmm. So definitely the one that makes me the most insane.
But is it better than Rogue Nation? Which is your favorite? I have a gun to your head. Tell me.
I can't say that. I can't. It's like picking my favorite child.
Well, my favorite child is Benji Dunn, so Rogue Nation is still my favorite. But this is very close.
Okay, well, if maybe we can split the children. You can have, we'll parent trap this. You can keep Rogue Nation, and I'll keep MI1. And MI1 can be my favorite, and Rogue Nation can be your favorite.
That's fair. Mm-hmm. Okay. But are you going to be mad at me if I say that MI1 is only my third favorite?
Oh, what's your second favorite? Is it Fallout?
Fallout, yes. Fallout is immaculate. It makes me cry sometimes, or it makes me tear up. I have not yet cried, but man, that ending is a lot.
I think Fallout is my third favorite. I think it's just switched for me. I think for me it goes MI1, Rogue Nation, Fallout. Just because...
Then Ghost Protocol, yeah.
Then Ghost Protocol, yeah. I think Fallout is just so tense for me to watch that I will always remember the first time I watched it, and I felt like I could not breathe for the entire last, half hour of that movie. So it never feels like it's as enjoyable to watch, but it also doesn't feel like it's as twisty exactly in the same way as MI1.
Yeah, I get that. But which is the worst?
Oh, MI2, for sure.
Okay, that's fine. I still think I hate J.J. Abrams so much that I think MI3... Because I was just bored through MI2. I was mostly just bored. It was just not enjoyable to watch, and I couldn't keep my brain on it. But I was riveted to MI3, and it just pissed me off more and more how bad that movie is.
See, my argument is that you could make a good cut of MI3. It wouldn't be very long, and it wouldn't be able to tell the full story, but there are a couple of good scenes in MI3. Whereas in MI2, I can't think of a single scene where I was like, oh, this is actually really good. Some of them were, funny and, enjoyable from a, silly point of view. But, none of them were oh, I'm actually really glad I saw this. None of them.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Except I'm really glad that we saw the scene where Swanbeck asks Ethan where the fuck the Chimera drug is. Because it's oh, they're the baddies again! Holy shit! True. Yeah. So that's vital information for us.
And we do still need to go back and watch just that one scene that we completely talked through that set up Swanbeck as a character.
We were so bored.
We were so bored. It had only just started and it was so fucking boring.
Yeah. They had the cute scene with Ethan, like, chilling out under Naya as she works, and then it was downhill from there.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right.
We're done.
That's
this
it.
has been the dissertation on MI1 and why it's a fucking masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to
Thank
Palma.
you. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.